Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, right before we came down to set up for our recording, I put on my nice new bright white Buckeye Insider shirt and I grabbed a nice big steaming hot cup of coffee. And then I thought, well, I think I'm courting disaster here. So I don't know. I may not even touch the coffee. It may just sort of sit over there safely away from the splash zone. We'll see. You have dressed much more intelligently for this game, for this show.
Yeah, but you can't see the chili stain on the back. Dropped a whole bucket of chili on my back, but that's another show. Yes, the digs, dig them. Yeah, Tom, the topic of today's show is something that I've been thinking about doing this for a while, and I wanted to do a tale of the tape between, frankly, all the last three Ohio State teams being 24, 25, and 26. But I wanted to start with 2026 versus 2024. And as I started doing this, quarterback compared against quarterback, like Will Howard against Julian Sayin, and comparing the running backs versus the running backs, and so on and so on, I kept going down the list. And I don't know that there's a single position group where I would readily take the 2026 Buckeyes over the 2024 team. And we can go through this and discuss it. But overall, I came out of that thinking, is this bad news? And we know the 2024 team won a national championship. I think the 2025 team could have won a national championship. I think the 2026 team probably could as well. But if we go through this and every single position points to the 2024 team over the 2026 team, except for maybe special teams,
Mhm.
is this a major concern?
So I think there's a couple different things, and I think there are certainly position groups where I would at least consider, if not lean towards, giving 2026 the edge. But I think that may also be a little bit reflective of the reality that you just can't stockpile talent the way
Yeah.
you used to. I think you look at the 2024 Buckeyes and you compare them to, some of the Urban Meyer Florida teams, for example, or some of the Nick Saban Alabama teams, and the high, that 2024 Ohio State team was one of the most talented in program history, but it was already, because of the transfer portal, because of NIL, it was already getting a little more challenging to stockpile talent. And now I think that's even gotten more true in the last couple of years where, recently Colorado beat Ohio State for a recruit. Why did Colorado beat Ohio State for a recruit? An in-state recruit from a pipeline school like Glenville. Well, Colorado doesn't have as much money to offer recruits as Ohio State does, but if that player is a much higher priority recruit for Colorado, they can throw more money at him than Ohio State can. If this is someone who's going to be the third best recruit in Colorado's class and the 18th best or 23rd best or whatever it is in Ohio State's class, Colorado can just spend more money on them. And that's going to move the needle with a bunch of people. And so that's something you're sort of seeing all around college football. This is not a uniquely Ohio State problem. This is something where Alabama hasn't been able to stockpile talent nearly the way it did before. Georgia hasn't been able to stockpile talent nearly the way it did before. Georgia lost a really good corner to Ohio State, which would have normally been a guy that, of course, he was going to be a rotational player for Georgia this year, and then would have, maybe he could win a starting job. No, he's off to Ohio State, and Ohio State has lost guys to other programs as well. So I think, yeah, you'd obviously prefer to have lots of advantages over a team that already won a national championship, but I think this might be a little bit of a sign of the times.
Alabama has trouble stockpiling Alabama talent, but you know which team doesn't?
True fact. Yes, I am putting together a series that I've done every 4 or 5 years or so, the most recent Buckeyes from each state. And Alabama, the last time I did this list in 2021 or so, there was one guy from 1981 who had been from Alabama who players on that team were like, "Who is that?" And it was like, well, he was in the media guide. I don't know. He never really showed up, I guess, on campus, but he was in the media guide, so I am counting him. but it was like there was this one guy. This year, I think they've got 5 players from Alabama,
Mm.
maybe 5 or 6 from the state of Alabama. Like they went to high school in the state of Alabama, and Ohio State has obviously raided the Alabama roster for some top prospects. So, while you're looking at how is Ohio State losing players like Aaron Scott or Bryce West to Oregon and
Mhm.
Wisconsin? People in Alabama are looking and going, well, how is Alabama getting treated like a AAA team for Ohio State?
I still remember when you put that list out, and one of the old Buckeyes on Twitter was like, "I was on that team. I don't know who this is."
Yeah, I looked him up. I think he ended up at Louisville and he was from Louisville. So I think he might have maybe not, he signed with Ohio State but didn't actually show up. His name was Dante Wheat. It's one of those names that is stuck in my mind. I tried to find him to do a follow-up story. He didn't
Mm.
find, his current whereabouts, but he had, I think, played for Louisville at some point. So anyway, that's enough about the 1981 Buckeyes. Let's talk more about the 2024 and 2026 Buckeyes, Tony.
So let's start with quarterback, and we don't have to spend a ton of time because one of the issues that I'm going to run into doing this is when you win a championship game, every single position gets the benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a tie, if like when we get to the offensive lines, like if it's a tie, well, I know the 2026 team has not won a national championship, and I know the 2024 team was good enough, that line. So that's one of the issues with doing that is just the championship bias that is a considerable way. The thumb is on the scale, but a 2026 Julian Sayin versus a 2024 Will Howard, if Julian Sayin can run a little bit like Will Howard did, and Will Howard could run a lot, but he only ran a bit for Ohio State. The accuracy in terms of the numbers are going to be similar. I think you'll see more touchdown passes for Julian Sayin, more touchdown rushes for Will Howard. But I guess this one, I could see an area where, or an opportunity for Julian Sayin to be better than Will Howard. I don't I don't think he needs. I don't know. Does he need to be better than Will Howard for Ohio State to win a national championship, or does he just need to be better? Does he need to be better than he was last year?
Well, I think he needs to be better than Will Howard throwing the ball because, as you said, he's not going to be able to do everything Will Howard could with his legs. But I think this is one that jumps out to me as, I think there will be people who say, well, look at the last 2 games last year and, how could you say that you would give Julian Sayin the advantage? I'm expecting substantial progress from Julian Sayin. And Julian Sayin's numbers last year were pretty darn good for the season on the whole. Will Howard also, you're coming off of Will Howard completing 16 consecutive passes to start the national championship game or whatever the number was. If you're doing this exercise after the Michigan game that year, I think that, you look at Julian Sayin last year and I think people will go, yep, give me that guy. So there's a little bit, as you said, of recency bias. The most recent impression you had of Will Howard was, boy, this guy is just lighting teams on fire in the college football playoff. And I think this is one where it's reasonable to disagree about this, I think, at the moment, but it would be pretty surprising to me if Julian Sayin was not the choice here by the time the season was over this year.
And in those two games, he averaged about 270 yards passing, completed about 2/3 of his passes. It's just there were 3 interceptions
Mm-hmm.
in those games. I also don't think you can, when you're comparing Julian Sayin to Will Howard, be like, well, look at Julian Sayin last year. Because when we're comparing Julian Sayin this year to Julian Sayin last year, and you say, well, look at Julian Sayin last year, are you saying that this year he's going to be the exact same? No. And I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm just saying when you want to compare these people, you have to assume. I assume that Julian Sayin is going to be better. So when we do a tail of the tape of 2025 versus 2026, you can't just be like, well, it's the same. It's a wash, because I don't think it will be. Go ahead.
No, I'm with you there. This, as in addition to having seen this team win a national championship, you have gotten the end of season version of all of these guys from 2024. And this is just sort of pure projection on 2026 right now. And we're expecting growth, and that's going to be true of the guys in the next position group as well. We haven't seen it yet. So that kind of gets baked into this conversation too.
Yeah. And we are a couple of weeks or so, a week past you saying this might be the deepest running back room in Ohio State history of all time. I said maybe since '92. You're like, no. all time. So the running backs, like it's really difficult to say that they are going to be better than Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson. And if you want to throw James Peoples and Sam Dixon in there, go ahead. But really, it's the top two, arguably, maybe not arguably, the best duo in Ohio State history. And to think that there's going to be two guys on this team or three guys that top those two, I think that's a very high bar to get over. But also, I don't think you need to go over that bar to have running backs that are good enough to win a national championship. I think the backs they had last year, were they good enough? No. Are they going to be better this year? I would presume. I assume they will be. And is that going to be good enough? I think so. I think they will be. I don't think they're going to be better than 2024, though.
No, I'm with you that the 2024 duo was one of the most talented, one of the best deployed, where they were out there and they were healthy, and they were not just healthy but also not completely gassed at the end of the season. And that was a really, really unique thing. Normally you've got the one running back, and he's J.K. Dobbins, and he's kind of been run into the ground a little bit by the end of the 2019 season, and he sprains his ankle, and then that's kind of it, and that really kills you at the end of the season. 2024 was two guys who were incredibly talented, very healthy, still very much at the peak of their games at the end of that season, and then boom, you get TreVeyon Henderson going off tackle for a long touchdown against Oregon, and TreVeyon Henderson taking that screen against Texas, and Quinshon Judkins scoring, I think, 3 touchdowns in that national championship game. That was about the pinnacle of what that Ohio State running back room can look like. This year, these are guys who last year, I think the youth in the running back room, the inexperience in the running back room, and some of the health issues in the running back room probably left them a little short of where they needed to be. This year, you got back the guys you really were leaning on last year. I mean, CJ Donaldson's gone, but I think Jacoby Jackson at least fills that CJ Donaldson role, if not giving you maybe a little bit more of a diverse skill set there. Bo Jackson's going to be better. He's older, more experienced. Isaiah West is going to be better. He's going to be older, more experienced. And you mix in like a Legend Bay there, which they did not have a real comparable player to Legend Bay last year. What does he give you? I don't know, but he's going to give you more than you got out of that position last year, because you really didn't have that spot filled last year. So, this Ohio State running back room is going to be better than 25, but 24 still is kind of the benchmark to me. And can they get there? Could, but they're definitely not there yet.
Yeah, and I think when you look at, I guess maybe the 2025 offense compared to the 2026, you're going to check most of the boxes for 2026, save for the receivers and the tight ends. And when you compare the 2026 Ohio State Buckeyes at receiver and tight end to the 2024, not much of a comparison either. The Jeremiah Smith, the Emeka Ibuka, Carnell Tate as your starting receivers, G. Scott, Will Kazmarek as your tight ends, compared to what they will put out there this year with Jeremiah Smith and Brandon Ennis and Devin McEwen, Kyle Parker, maybe Chris Henry Jr., Brock Boyd, Jaquaden Guilford, maybe Phillip Bell, Dazee Jones. They've got a bunch of tight ends that they like, but I can list all of those names, all 10 of them or whatever, and they don't match up and equate to the 5 that I mentioned from 2024. I don't think this one needs a bunch of discussion, Tom, but if you have to talk, feel free.
No, Jeremiah Smith is an upgrade from 2024 Jeremiah Smith. He's gotten better each year, but there is not anyone on this team that you would look at and go, yeah, that's sort of comparable to Emeka Ibuka or Carnell Tate at this point. Again, could Chris Henry turn into a player of something like that caliber? Sure, he could, but not yet. I'm not ready to have that kind of conversation just yet.
Yeah, and I think I've said it before. I think they'll have to bring in a transfer after this season if they want to continue their first round draft pick selections at receiver, because I just don't see one on there right now that will be eligible in 2028 for the NFL draft. So then offensive line, and this one is really, really difficult for me because that 2024 offensive line and everything they went through and everything they accomplished, that's hard to beat. Now, if this offensive line can match that, I expect this offensive line to be very, very good. But when I'm comparing the two, I have to look at like, okay, well, what do they do if Carson Hinsman goes down like at game 10? And can somebody step in and do as well as Carson Hinsman did when he stepped in for Seth McLaughlin? Or what if whoever is playing left tackle goes down? Can they step, if Ian Morris goes down, can Austin Seerveld step in? Well, we know the answer to that. So there is some flexibility that I think makes this 2026 room really, really good and can contend. I think maybe one of the points that I could throw to make maybe the argument for the 2026 is if they did lose their left tackle, the guy that they're going to put in there is going to be better than Zen Mahalski.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. I think that's one spot where you could certainly uh, find an advantage. Is there Carson Hinsman is potentially a Remington Award caliber center this year, and you had a Remington Award caliber center on the team in 2024, but you got to remember they lost their left tackle, their starting left tackle. They lost their starting who ended up being a first round NFL pick. You lost a center, and then you were national championship caliber. Now, for long stretches that year, there were a lot of questions as to what they were going to be and were they good enough, and they're rotating guys. And I still remember doing the show going into the Tennessee game where Ryan Day is talking about, maybe we're going to just sort of, we'll just kind of roll with three different guys at guard and just sort of figure it out. And it was like, pardon, what? Sir, this is a college football playoff game, don't you? And he turned out to know that, which was fortunate for him and for the program. But yeah, that's a team that you look back on, and the offensive line was not, the finished product at the end of the year was really, really good and did everything they needed it to do. I think this year's team could absolutely get there. I think for long stretches of this year, you could have a better 2026 offensive line than you did 2024. Like, I would challenge you to go back and rewatch that 2024 Nebraska game, the one with Zen Mahalski in as your starter. And not great, Bob, would be how I would describe that one. But if you take, you take the starting center off this year's team, and you take the starting left tackle off this year's team, and you got to shuffle guys, and at that point, if this team has to go through all of the stuff that the 2024 team did, I think that would be challenging. They could do it, but it would be challenging. But right now, at least at the start of the season, at the mid-October point of the season, I think there's an argument that you could go for the 2026 offensive line over 2024.
Yeah. They're equipped to handle those issues this year. Nobody thought they were at the time in 2024. We talked several times. Who can they most afford not to lose? Number one was Josh Simmons, and then number two, once that happens, like, well, now you can't afford to lose Seth McLaughlin. And then I remember getting those early initial reports that something happened, and it's just like, there's the season. That the season, it's over, and it wasn't. And so that's a credit to everybody on that offensive line. Certainly credit to Carson Hinsman, who now leads this unit as the center. So we'll go ahead and stop there. We'll talk about defense on the next show. I'll be interested in getting your thoughts out there. As you're watching this, are we wrong on these? Go ahead and give us your tale of the tape at each position, what you think is going to happen in terms of, will 2026 be better than 2024? Could Bo Jackson, Isaiah West, Legend Bay, Jacoby Jackson outperform TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, who I believe scored 27 touchdowns combined, rushing and receiving? They both had big touchdown catches in 2024 as well. So they made plays, and that's the thing. They may get outrushed this year, but the number of plays that they made when they had to be made, and the consistency, and just the keeping Ohio State on target and on pace, and the efficiency and all of that, just really, really solid in keeping that offense going and keeping the opponent on their heels. But that'll do it for here. If you're watching, hit that thumbs up. We'd appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet done so. YouTube.com/@BuckeyeInsiders. If you're listening, that's where you can find us. If you are looking for a website, perhaps to find us, you can find us at BuckeyeInsiders.com. It is now live. We've got members. We've got the message board is going. We've got a survey on our message board that we've got for users because we want to make this community and this website what everybody wants, what you want. So the best way for us to do that is to give us your feedback. And the best way to support us, if you're watching us, is to become a member at BuckeyeInsiders.com so that we can build the best thing for the people out there. So that will do it from here. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.